This
Are we gonna make up
conference will
that?
now be recorded.
Well,
Oh,
that's, I
I'm
don't know,
asking, like, is that true?
it's lost as of now, but it might not be lost permanently. I mean, that's impossible to predict at this point.
So
Right,
you're
but you know, that's
gonna,
it's also important to point out that this report is only as of May 8th. So this is total year revenue. It's only up to that date of what had been collected this year and in the prior year. So there still
Right.
is an opportunity to collect. But yes, you could argue that, say, parking fees, you know, if no one returns back to work, yes, the borough would most likely take a hit on parking fees.
well, not most likely. Yes, they're not gonna double up and go to work and make 4 extra months of, or 3 months of parking in the last, whatever, 8 months of the year. Like, you know, we're not gonna get double the amount of people going for 4 months to work to make up for the 4 months that we've lost, or 3 months, or whatever it is. My point is, I'm trying to get some sort of a number that I guess you and Dave, that at this point, we've lost for sure X amount of dollars, and I'm not clear what that X amount of dollars is yet. Like, I haven't really heard you say that number. Like, based on May 8th.
Ned, I'm not sure
Yeah,
that
the
it's
difference
correct
will
to
be.
say that we've lost it. I just think that the only thing that you can draw conclusion from the report, and I'll stand to be corrected by the CFO, is that we're running at a pace that, if you look at the first 4.5 months of the year, versus, you know, and our revenues are down from 2019. So,
Yeah.
and what I was hoping to get to, and I think this is about all we can achieve right now, is somewhat a factor of roughly in the upper teens. We're running a little behind based on the first 4.5 months. That may hold up for the next 7 months, whatever it is, 6.5, whatever my math, or it may get better. I don't suspect it will get better, but it may either stay the same or get a little worse. I was just trying to have the council understand what, you know, where we're at, given that we're through 4.5 months of the year.
Right. I don't know that it's fair to say it definitely won't get better. In some cases, it could just be timing differences. The FEMA, $50,000 of FEMA money that came in the first 5 months or 4 months last year, we'll be getting in FEMA money, just it's different timing in the year. Obviously, we're going to get FEMA money because of the COVID-19. So I don't know it's fair to say in every case we're going to be down or it'll be worse.
We're going to start seeing some increases already. I've already spoken to the bank, who is going to come to us with a proposal to bring us back to earning interest on our accounts. We were at 0 since March 15th, or the middle of March. They've come back with potentially, you know, a small percentage, so that should increase some of that, not to where we would have been, but it's better than 0. The court is now starting to hold their virtual sessions. I think the first one is this week, so we should hopefully start getting some fines out of that. Any release and restriction of any amount for the construction department should turn into fee-based revenue from them. So I don't think any of those are dead in the water. I just think that for now, they've slowed to the pace that the government has forced them to slow down to. So they should pick up to some degree. Whether we'll be able to catch up depends on how long, much longer, we have to stay at this current pace.
Right. And so I think wasn't part of the discussions that we've had in the past was that it would be up to the BA and and you, Dave, to be tracking these type of expenses and to be aware of them as they're coming along, and that you would be gauging them in terms of revenues lost versus therefore, if you think 17% of the revenues, for example, 20% have been lost, then you would have to adjust your spending to reflect that 20%, for example. Is that something that you would be doing then, Chris?
Yes, and when we plan to discuss that, I think that's discussion item number 5.
Okay, well, we kind
We
of
plan
went,
to discuss that.
but okay, that says ambulance committee.
I think you mean number 4.
Oh, number 4. Yes,
Sorry,
go
the one
ahead.
I have it's 5, but that's okay. Yeah,
That's
whichever one.
okay.
Yeah, it's scheduled for
Okay.
discussion.
All right,
Council.
all right, keep going. So that
Okay.
was the revenue, okay.
So the third bullet there, which is the comparison of the borough salary/wage expenses pre-COVID now. I asked the borough administrator and the CFO to compare the salary and wages pre-COVID 2020 to see what we are incurring now. There isn't much difference in both, looking at both time periods. The salary data that I was supplied with and which you were all provided with prior to this meeting indicates that, you know, we could save slightly over $5,000 weekly if we furloughed part-time workers in the borough and the library. They might be financially better off if we did so because they would be paid more in unemployment benefits with the federal $600 extra benefit than if we decided to pay them. But their duties at Borough Hall would have to be reassigned. That's the problem. Government has assigned particular duties, and if you furlough people, someone's got to pick up those duties. It's not like you have a large mass of people doing the same thing, and or to lose one. It's just not that way. Now the library could absorb any furloughs more easily as long as the library remains. Its employees are not in the building. As I understand it, they were doing telecommuting, but at this point, the amount of work that actually is being done on a telecommuted basis isn't very measurable. So I wanted the council to bear in mind a couple of things. Much greater savings are achievable. You have the data. If you go beyond just the limited amount of part-time workers, if unionized members of the workforce agree to a furlough plan. The second point is another option is across the board reductions in salary for all borough employees and for elected officials. That's another possibility that the council should be considering. And while it may be too early for the council to decide on either one of those or another alternative that council members wish to think about, I wanted to encourage the council to think about, whether they want to authorize the BA to proceed laying down the groundwork for any of these actions. That's something I think the council owes the BA tonight, so that the borough has these as viable options as we approach and get deeper into the end of 2020 in these sort of unprecedented times. So with that, Chris, do you have any comments that you want to make on that third bullet? And then I'd like a discussion from the council members as to their reaction.
No, just to emphasize, Mayor, and you already stated it, that outside of the 10 or so department heads or people that are not covered under a union, everyone else is covered under a collective bargaining agreement. So that would require the borough, our council, labor council, to go to each of those unions and request a meeting to discuss terms, to negotiate that contract to include a reduction in force, furloughs, or reductions in pay.
Okay. Questions for the borough administrator or CFO or me or anyone else?
I have a question. I don't have to take it position by position because, as you said, certain people can't have other people do their jobs. They can't do other people's jobs because of segregation of duties. There's a lot of things that come into play. I don't know that it could be straight across the board. I think it has to be looked at position by position. Am I wrong?
No.
No,
Some of them are licensed, they're licensed positions. I couldn't do Paulie's job or Darren's job and vice versa. They're very, or Marguerite's job. I mean, so a lot of these 12 or so positions that are in that part-time column for potential furlough, there really isn't anyone else to do it. So, you know, that number really isn't, it's could be, but it's not realistically could be. So, that's just something else I think you have to make sure you keep in mind. So you're correct in that, is that there isn't a lot of cross-training that has done with some of these other positions. It's just not possible.
I don't even know that it's necessarily cross-training, Dave, but even, you know, as far as your position, I know you can't do, because of your CMFO position, you can't do accounts payable. So we would have to find, you know, if that were to be a position.
Right, yeah,
that
obviously,
affects-
besides the segregation of duties, there's just
Right.
issues of licensure. I mean, I
Sure,
don't
right.
think about, you know, fire prevention code, you know, so, you know, that's the point I was making, besides the segregation issues.
And in addition to that, Councilmember Lundy, is that I'm beginning to phase some workers back into the office here because I have identified administratively that without them here physically, other members of my staff are picking up their duties, which are then reducing their duties on limited capacity that they're in the office. So it is causing a workflow issue.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can hear
Yes,
you,
go
Frank.
ahead, Frank.
Sorry. I read somewhere that, and I'm sorry, I've lost my voice. I read somewhere that, for example, the Board of Ed has been given direction by the state to keep certain employees employed and paid. Have we gotten any direction from the state on what we're required to do when it comes to our employees? Is there any limitation on what we can do as the state
No.
provided guidance?
Frank, to answer your question, I'm not aware of any such guidance. I don't think Chris is either. We'd probably get the same guidance. I think the state itself is struggling with the issue, given that the administration realizes it is bleeding heavily from all of the commitments that it needed to make during the COVID crisis. I mean, it wasn't in great shape before. It's in worse shape now.
Okay.
I can add to that just quickly, Mr. Vizzarro. There's a local finance notice that came out that Chris touched on just a bit earlier about how to plan your support recovery strategy. And they list specifically that, while depending on size of municipality and location and certain other factors, there's a certain core of positions that they consider to always be essential. And they list them out as public safety, public works, administration, finance, land use, which is construction and that department, water and sewer, and information technology, technically classified as always essential. So that's the guidance we've gotten so far from them. It is a little bit fluid based upon the size of your town and where you are, but certainly where we are versus where somewhere way in down South Jersey someplace, those are our essential departments. So that's kind of the starting point that we work with.
That's good to know. Thank you. That they've provided that is at least a good thing. We have some guidance at least as to what's essential.
Chris,
Yes.
on the staffing level spreadsheet that you sent us, at the top of it, you have some percentages. You have weekly furlough savings at 25%, weekly furlough savings at 50%. Is this saying if you furloughed people 50% of the time?
Yes, that's what their salary.
So that means they would work 50% and be furloughed 50%?
Correct.
But isn't that kind of what they're doing anyway, except they're being paid? Aren't they not working? Some of them are working from home or working half the amount of time, or only coming in certain days. So aren't they kind of like furloughed, except that they're being paid? Isn't it kind of the same?
No, I wouldn't say they're furloughed. They've only been asked not to report to work as ordered by Executive Order 107 to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So I wouldn't classify that as a furlough.
Right, but I'm saying, so I think it may be late now because we're 2 months into this. So if people would have been furloughed, shouldn't they have been furloughed? You can't retroactively furlough people. So shouldn't they have been furloughed 2 months ago? Like, there's no point to furlough people now when the governor is extended us till June, I think it's June 6th right now, which is maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So I wouldn't think that we're going to go and furlough people today. So isn't this something we should have been like talking about in the past?
We
You know what I
absolutely
mean?
could. We could have discussed this from the onset. However, as I've previously mentioned, most of the borough employees here are covered by a collective bargaining unit. So we'd have to bring each unit to the table and have them agree to a furlough. Now, based on my experience with unions, a union is not going to agree, at least quickly, to any form of reduction in pay or time for their employee.
Yes, but I'm not talking about the police or whoever else is in the union. Your schedule doesn't even have them included in the column. You have this savings that you came up with that was 10,000, is that right? $10,000 per week if they were
Right. So
full
if we're
50%?
discussing the 10 individuals outside
Right.
outside bargaining units, that includes me, Denise,
Yes, the
Dave.
office. Yeah.
You know, if the council wishes to furlough us, that's fine, but the council would have to recognize that then 50% of the operation of the government would halt because there would be no one here. I mean, Denise issues marriage licenses. Dave collects taxes. Essentially, the functions of local government wouldn't operate.
I am not suggesting that we do furlough. What I'm sort of trying to understand is you're not working full time now, are you? Are you working full time?
I would
Chris.
think anybody, Chris, is working full time.
I probably work in excess of 60 to 70 hours per week.
Yes.
Okay, so some of your staff is coming in and some of your staff is not coming in, is what you said
That's
at the
correct. Some of
beginning.
them work remotely.
So they're working from home. Also like, okay, so now I'm gonna jump to the library. So the library is working from home?
That's correct. But the library is governed by the Board of Trustees, not the borough.
So, okay, so I was just curious what the library is doing from home. I don't understand
The
what,
library, Dave Franz, the library director, has instructed them on certain tasks, including professional development. Not that I necessarily agree with that, but I don't have much of a say in that decision.
Janetta,
So back-
I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the library.
okay,
They have decided to continue to pay their employees, even though they are not working. Now, initially, when the library closed, they had their employees working on things that they could do legitimately from home. I think the director was actually coming into the library to work on lots of things. But I think now it's my understanding that there isn't much more to do. So I've asked the Board of Trustees to consider this because the borough, being under financial stress, may not be able to provide the amount to the library in excess of the 1/3 mil that we are required by law to give the library. That we are required to give. But traditionally, the borough has been generous with the library. And this year, as in prior years, we would typically give anywhere like 120, 130. This year, I think it's 139,000 beyond what is required. That I don't think is financially tenable if the borough is going to be suffering financial stress. So Christopher and I have raised this issue with the director, and he with the Board of Trustees, and they have to make a decision, and they have to make a decision hopefully soon. But that, as Chris points out, it is their decision. If they continue to be extremely liberal in their payment approach, they're going to have problems with running the library. Because if the borough doesn't give them the excess amount, they're going to have to either print money or close shop or change operations or something. They're going to have to do something different. And that was my advice to the board, that they come up with a plan B. And hopefully they're doing that.
So Chloe, you want to convince me? Right, I'm the same way. I'm like coaching Chloe. I'm like, so you like uniform? But it's so funny
Madam
when you.
Clerk, can you control this?
That's what you were gonna say.
Then it's nice though, and whatever, it's like,
Why don't you get
finish
Could people who are on mute your phone if you're not going to be talking?
I know how animals
stronger.
carry
I
things.
Yeah.
really do believe that.
Yeah, they do spread it. You're right. No, they eat the plants and then they.
I said, I go like this. Oh, but that chapter's closed.
No,
Like,
I think
I
it's but I'm sorry, like,
Well,
they don't.
Did you
listen, I
use the
explain to
phone?
my daughter sometimes, like the same thing.
Okay,
I don't know.
What?
somebody's phone is obviously on and
A lot of my
they
life,
don't
my
know.
I'm just not in the mood today.
There
Oh,
we go.
okay.
Silence is
So,
golden.
just apropos to the other question that came up during, I guess, the public commentary period, when I think it was Jonathan DeJoseph that asked a question about the library and them doing overtime. And then Chris, you said that, so I think you said that if they would do the overtime, of course, it would have been approved, but who actually approves those? I was gonna ask you, who approves the payroll pay sheets, or I don't know if they submit them or they're salaried,
The
like.
library director would have signed off on that. I've already sent him an email to explain what that overtime is for.
Mhm. Okay.
Janetta, it is possible that one or two individuals who maybe early on in the closure of the library were working on something that Dave wanted them to work on, and perhaps they worked into the overtime. So that is possible.
It's possible, but I just think somebody should look into that then. If a comment came up to that effect, someone should follow up with it. So I'm sure Chris or Dave or whoever will follow up with that idea.
Okay.
But I certainly don't think that.
So let me try to move this along. What is the feeling on the part of the council members? We have the probability of financial distress for the borough. Do you want to have the borough administrator begin to explore with the union, with other employees on a selected basis, as Abby has rightfully pointed out? Do you want to hear from the borough administrator at a future meeting what he's doing in this regard, or would you prefer to wait, down the road? This is something that I think the borough administrator would appreciate it if that's the view of the council. He would appreciate getting guidance now.
I would suggest that he do so, Mayor. It's better to be prepared than face the issue that comes up and not be prepared for that. So it would behoove us to do that.
I think that it's not only the borough administrator that needs to be thinking of what a future plan might look like. I think it's part of management, right? You have to protect the back end. And so sometimes when you have a problem like this, we're all facing it for the first time as we find more and more information out. So I don't want to bring up, but for example, like the Board of Ed, I'm sure they have many people who are currently employed and still being paid, and you kind of scratch your head and you say, well, why are they paying those people? I think that the way the situation has come about is that people are finding out more and more information as we go along. And as we find out more information, we're going to have to plan accordingly. I'm not looking to have anybody fired or furloughed or whatever, but I think that for the benefit of the town, that the borough administrator should, as I think any manager that's dealing with this type of situation would, have an alternative plan should it really get worse. But I think that we have to play it by ear as we get more information. This may not, it may turn around and it may not get worse. It may not get worse until November. And I think that it's important that the borough administrator, that the town have an alternative plan should it get worse. And it's not just the town. I mean, the Board of Ed is something else as well. I mean, you're not doing everything. You said it yourself, like the library. You're not doing everything that you would normally do. So how can we continue to pay everything that we would normally pay? So that's my opinion.
I think the borough administrator is looking for more direction than come up with an alternate plan. I think we owe it to him to give him some sort of direction. And my suggestion would be at least start department by department and see where we can make cuts without affecting any services or any responsibilities of jobs that won't get done. I think he has to start somewhere.
And
Right.
I think he has made good progress on that by virtue of the report that he's produced. And the savings are not great. It will require more discretion on his part, because as he pointed out, and as you pointed out, and Dave did too, sometimes you just can't take a position and say, you're gone, furloughed for 16 weeks, go and enjoy your unemployment benefits, come back in 16 weeks. The borough might not be able to perform certain essential functions unless those functions can be offloaded to another individual. So I think the council, it's good as far as it goes. If the council says to the borough administrator, proceed in that vein. But I think the other alternatives should, that we should have done some research on as we get deeper into the year is salary reductions or furloughing of DPW, police, whatever. You don't want to, that's a very sensitive thing because safety is the number one thing that we provide in this borough here. And you want to tread very carefully before you do something like that. The residents also don't want to see, DPW services dissipated to the point where we're not doing the essential services. But having said that, not to prepare or to lay the groundwork for different things strikes me as a little risky and dangerous. It may all be for naught because maybe it doesn't get as bad as they're saying, but when you read the financial press, you see people out of work, you see unemployment now at 17, 18%. They're talking about it going up to possibly 30% in the third quarter. It's mind-boggling. It's beyond the recession of 2008. We're talking about conditions that are more like the Great Depression of the 30s. But I personally think the economy will bounce back. I just have faith in the economy. That's the way I am. But I think that there'll be a rough period of time, and it'll take some time for the economy to come back. So I heard Councilman Horvath say he would like to have the borough administrator proceed to think about ways to these different options. I think, Frank Pizzella, you've said the same thing. I don't know about others.
That's absolutely
like to
correct,
think
Mary.
that-
That's like going out on a deep sea fishing trip and not taking a life vest with you would be kind of foolish, no matter how well you swim. So it would be good to be prepared.
Can
I'd
I
like
ask
to hear
another
from the other
question?
council members.
I have another question. Are we instructing the borough administrator to start talking with the collective bargaining units? Because we're only going to incur labor attorney fees. Do we want to add labor attorney fees on top of everything else?
Sometimes to answer your question, sometimes to achieve greater things down the road, you have to spend some money now.
But is that the
that's a
direction
question.
we want to go, or do we want
That's
to?
what I mean. That's what I'm asking you for your opinion.
So
Mike, here's
I have a question, but are we discussing like doing this for the next 2 weeks until June 6th? Or are we gonna wait until June 6th and see what the governor does? The governor on June 6th extends this one more month, let's just say, then there's a conversation to be had, but we're not gonna like put people on furlough for 2 weeks. That doesn't make
No,
sense.
this isn't,
Is that what we're saying at this point?
no, Janetta, I don't think anyone's talking about actually
Nobody is.
anybody. The only thing we're talking about is, does the council wish the borough administrator to begin the planning process for something way down the road, possibly third quarter, fourth quarter? And it may never, the plan may never have to be implemented, but if you wait until the bad times come, then, and you're scrambling to put together a plan, that's not a good thing.
So
I would like to think he's been doing this already. I don't know if he really needs our official blessing to do it. I would imagine that Chris is thinking ahead for the next quarter in taxes, depending on the revenues and stuff. I don't know if he needs our official blessing. I mean, of course, I would imagine he's going to have it, but I would like to think that he's been planning for this stuff already.
So
Well, I think Chris just wanted, in my discussions with him, he wanted some direction from the council, because it, as Abby points out, it does involve some additional expense. It involves us going in a direction that we're not used to, no one is comfortable with.
I think
I think-
fair
If I
to
may,
the
Mayor.
borough administrator.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I think
Yes,
it's fair-
I'm sorry.
I think it's fair to give the borough administrator some direction. I think we've all realized that this situation has continued to be in flux. We have dates that have been changing based on the governor's order that we live by. I think if we're looking at cost savings, we should have an idea of what deficit we may be trying to mitigate, so we know where, to the extent of the cost cutting that we could do. That said, though, I think it's always good to have options. So I would support the BA looking into, I think it's a good spend of money to at least have an initial conversation with all the bargaining units to say, if it came to this, what would it be? Just contingency plans, you know, and a couple of timelines, you know, as far as how far out it could be. The schools are doing it as well. But I don't think it needs to be a full-blown, investigation. I think it just needs to be options. And I think it's prudent for us to do it.
Chris, you had wanted the floor before, I'm sorry.
No, I think Councilman DeRosa kind of cleared it there. I just wanted direction to move forward with Labor Council to approach the three respective bargaining units, PBA, Public Works, and UPSU, to begin those conversations, because there could be a spread of misinformation that once we start those conversations, that the council is going down a road that it's not necessarily going. So I just want to be clear that if I do begin that process, that it's really only to start the conversation, because they may not even respond.
Yeah, it's a conversation, and you can tell that conversation by telling the truth. We're not planning on doing this, but we'd like to know what our options are.
But Chris, before I,
Hold on,
Chris,
Frank.
I'm sorry.
Hold on, wait.
Yeah,
Anthony, you done?
Yeah, I'm just saying I'm one council member. I'd like to hear, from my council.
Frank, go ahead, you have the floor.
I just doing this kind of thing for the job that I do when I deal with failing assets. I put a plan or a proposed plan in place before I have those conversations, because the minute you start to have those conversations, it sends a message, and it might not be the message the town wants to be sending right now. So I would come up with sort of how you want to address it. Now, you might have already come up with a draft plan in dealing with this type of situation or something like that. But I wouldn't reach out to them with Labor Council until you have a plan that you feel that you're comfortable with, that maybe council even could get insight into, or give you some suggestions on approaching the situation should it get worse. That's just my opinion, I'm sorry.
Anyone else want to add to the discussion?
Well, my opinion on this is I just think the PBA should sit down with the head of the PBA, with the chief of police, with the DPW head, before we do any kind of labor council, because I think once you involve labor council, I think everybody's gonna start getting their panic up, and I think the conversation will probably take a different turn. So I think very formally first, we should start with the department heads as opposed to involving council right away.
If that's an option, I'd opt for that. I thought you had to speak with Labor Council to have that conversation. If that's not necessary, then I'd opt for that.
No, I can absolutely approach the chief, the superintendent of public works, and identify where they think or they don't think their departments can go in a certain direction, and then bring that back to council.
Yeah, I think that
started those conversations. I think I know the feelings of both the chief and the superintendent, but I can have a little bit more of a formal conversation, put some numbers before them to give them a little more to think about, and give me a kind of a strong answer to provide to council.
Chris, I think that's what I suggested before, to go department by department, speak with each department head or each union president, however it goes, and, including the finance department, including the rec department, go to each department and come up with, see what they come up with, because maybe there's things that they know as far as people's responsibilities that can shed some insight on this.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been partially completed. The only hurdle the borough will face here is negotiating the terms with those union lawyers. But I'll start with the chief and the superintendent and the shop steward for Upsuit, and see where it takes me.
And again, I'll go the unpopular route and say, if you came up with a $5,000 per week savings for furlough, we have $45,000 in almost 10 weeks right in our own stipends.
Well, that was one of the options I had suggested. Either
You said no when I suggested it.
Either salary reductions or, well, I'm fine. If you want to make a proposal that cuts all the stipends of the council tonight to zero, you can make that resolution.
Suggestion, which I made last council as well.
I think, look, personally, I would consider that, but in the vein of what we've been talking about in just considering options, let's just say that's an option. There's possibly $45,000 there. And if down the line it's needed, I'm speaking for myself and I guess maybe Councilwoman Lundy, it's there if we need it. Okay. It's part of the plan.
You have the option, you have the information you need now to move ahead?
I do, Mayor, and if I find it appropriate that I get the information together in the next week or two, I can always call for a special council meeting, and if need be, we can discuss this in executive session.
Great. Okay. So I'd like to move on. The fourth discussion point was I had asked the borough administrator to make good on his commitment to give this council, before we voted on the budget, a more detailed understanding of what appropriations in the 2020 budget could be temporarily frozen or canceled altogether, if necessary, to better manage our expected fiscal difficulties. It was my view that this was made necessary because from the time the budget was first developed in February, and then we amended it in April to provide our residents some measure of property tax relief by keeping their taxes flat, the revenue projections became more uncertain as we were going week by week. So while this council may approve the amended budget tonight, and that's the next item on the agenda, it's necessary. I think it's necessary to adopt an austerity approach to spending. The borough administrator and I have discussed this, and I'm looking for the BA to be specific as to perhaps what items could be held back in terms of spending until revenues become better known. So I'd like to hear from the BA or the CMFO if that's required.
Sure. So Mayor, option, topic C in my memo to council outlines the O&E for the borough, and that will be monitored over the next several weeks in order to evaluate the need for specific items and services for borough operations in order to maintain services and public safety that Hillsdale residents expect and ultimately deserve as taxpayers. The CFO and I will monitor expenses and take a conservative approach to spending in order to maintain appropriate cash flow as the borough enters uncertain collection for third and fourth quarter taxes based on an uncertain financial position that we face at all levels, both local, state, and federal. Cash flow will be imperative as the borough has certain statutory payments, as I noted earlier in the meeting, including schools and county taxes that need to be paid moving forward. The CFO and I will continue to monitor the borough's revenue sources parallel to borough expenditures to ensure our financial position at the end of calendar year 2020 is appropriate in order to create a calendar year 2021 budget that would potentially not place a burden on the taxpayer or the need for the borough to draw down on its fund balance. I'll be honest, it is difficult to say which appropriation lines will not be expensed or partially expensed, as multiple contracts and services which are necessary and required for the operation of the borough are assigned to those lines across various borough departments. Appropriations that can be monitored as they're easier to determine what could be encumbered and ultimately processed include office supplies, education, training, conferences and meetings, membership subscriptions, travel, new equipment, recognition and awards, the services of our borough professionals, and the celebration of public events. If the budget is adopted as amended this evening, I will remind once again department heads that only essential purchases shall be made for the effective and efficient operation of their respective departments. Reports on revenues and expenditures, as well as collections, will be included moving forward in the council meeting packet once we have an approved final budget. Collections for the second quarter have been high, despite the grace period extension. Third and fourth quarter collections are unknown, and spending will be monitored accordingly. I'll go into the capital program just to cover it all, Mayor, and then I'll take questions. The 2020 municipal budget includes a cash 1.1 capital program for which no short-term or long-term debt would be incurred for the completion of the requested projects items from the departments. $620,000 includes an aggressive road resurfacing program, and I would recommend that this project move forward as scheduled. Other requested items in the program will be prioritized and a needs assessment completed prior to the encumbrance and ultimate purchase of those items or those programs. Items projected to be funded through are improvements to the municipal building for security purposes, equipment for the Department of Public Works and Police Department on a project-based request by the superintendent and the chief, respectively. My recommendation to council is to introduce tonight the capital ordinance on May 12th and adopt funding at our June 9th, 2020 meeting. This will allow for the road program to be bid and roads paved prior to fall and hopeful opening of our public schools. Other projects in the program will be evaluated based on price and availability and based on need as outlined in cooperative purchasing contracts. So I'm happy to take questions from the council on the operations and expenses and our capital program.
Chris, one question for you. Have you looked into shared services for anything to save us money?
Shared services, I think that we may have one. I would rather not speak to it at the current moment, as I have not notified the employer or the employees as to the status of that department. But for the most part, I think Hillsdale, being a smaller municipality, would not benefit from certain shared services.
Thank you.
In your statement, you said a mouthful. I want to make sure that I got it right. I think in terms of priority, you said the road program would move ahead. That was a priority for you.
That's correct, Mayor.
And that all else in the capital budget, you would freeze, but you would be open should the right arguments be made or should the necessity occur, you'd want to move ahead with them. Is that a correct assessment? That's
correct. That's correct, Mayor.
Okay. Because I think, judging from discussions with various council people, they wanted that type of specificity, which was not mentioned at the prior council meeting. So I'll leave it at that and let anyone else have questions for you.
I just have one comment before any questions. We ran reports just to see already the results of what we've been trying to wrangle on expenses. And if you run the same period from 1/1 to, I believe we did it through May 11th last year and this year, we are $60,000 approximately less in spending than we were this time last year. And our expenditures run pretty consistent, same vendors for the most part, same amounts. A lot of them have, multi-year contracts. So we really don't have, as I said in our discussion, it's kind of boring a little bit. I mean, we have the same expenses usually every year. So we've already started that process that we promised we would start. And it's already had that much of an effect. So that was one analysis we've already completed just on Monday.
The matters that Chris listed, office supplies, education, membership, travel, all of those are admittedly not going to yield a great deal of extra expense reduction. There's not that much there. There's a little, but not that much there to actually squeeze. The biggest bang for your buck, so to speak, comes with the capital improvement fund, which, as Chris pointed out, he's positioned us, and you put money in that capital improvement fund as if it were an operating expense, so that you don't have to borrow money when you move ahead with your capital acquisitions and capital investments. And I think that's where the significant savings might have to come from if necessary. And I heard the borough administrator say he does not want to cut back on the road program. I personally tend to agree with that. I also didn't hear you say something that you had said to me previously, which was you thought the front end loader was an essential piece of the puzzle for you, that you thought we had to go ahead with that. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. I think it's necessary for the upcoming leaf season. And I also think that based on the price and the availability through a cooperative contract, that it's a good idea to move ahead with that project as well.
Okay. But all else then can be temporarily frozen? You're comfortable with that? And is the council
I think the only thing else that I mentioned, Mr. Mayor, was that for the municipal building security, which is in there, which I think would also be beneficial for the safety of our staff and our residents. But outside of that, I would require a needs assessment and a project-based assessment from the department head to bring to the council committee to discuss the absolute need for anything else from the capital program.
Okay.
Chris, would any of the improvements in Borough Hall, as far as putting up partitions or glass to help mitigate the spread of the COVID, be able to be reimbursed by FEMA and also be security measures?
Yes, I think the plan, I won't go into too much detail since it does go to security, but I do think that some of it would be reimbursable from FEMA if we do it the right way.
Any further questions on this point?
On the capital, I don't have any questions. I think the administrator was pretty clear on that. Just on the overall expenses. I said it in a finance meeting as far as appropriations. I'm not going to sit there and go line by line and nickel and dime Chris and Dave. I leave it to their discretion. They're ultimately, going to be accountable to us. They know what they need to do. And I'm not going to go line by line and nickel and dime them. I don't think that's, if that's the direction you're looking for us to give them, I'm not going to do that.
Most of the big bang items are contractual anyway, are garbage, health benefits, BCUA, all the bigger numbers in those budget pages, debt service are either mandatory or contractual that you can't change. So there aren't a lot of big areas that you can easily just cut and say, there you go. It just you can't. So
Right, and also in terms of other lines like contractual services and agreements across other departments, the way that this has been set up is that each department pays their portion of, say, our IT vendor or the copier or the postage machine. And I think it's a testament to the borough that we're already 60,000 down in expenditures thus far this year, and that I think I've been very clear in my staff to the department heads that we're only going to spend what we need to. And I think, as evidenced in the last bills list and evidenced in this bills list, I think the department heads have done a good job in sticking to my directive.
Chris, one question for you. That's
Sure.
great that you're making all these comments, and these are the things that we were looking for. Some of these things may not pan out, that we need not by the appropriations. We're going to know in the next month or so exactly where we stand, if it's going to be better or if it's going to be worse. The whole issue was just not go ahead full bore with these things right away to see how it pans out. So it's just a question of not putting us into a hard position, especially predicated on our current finances and the receivables that are not coming in or may not come in. So it's just something that will have to be looked at closely. Some of the things that you will be spending, will you be coming back to the council, or are you just going to go ahead and do it?
I think ultimately it's my and Dave's day-to-day operation to make those decisions. I think the capital program, as I mentioned, if the department head, such as the chief or the superintendent, come to me with a needs-based assessment of a certain item in the capital program, I bring it to that committee that oversees that department as a liaison to the council to discuss it there, and then ultimately bring it to the council by resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
ultimately, remember, the final signature on any the bills list is in your hands as well. So if you choose to pull something from a bills list, that's the ultimate final say in whether it gets paid or not, even if we felt it should have been paid. So you ultimately have that final signature, as you all know, and the task you have to purchase
Well,
orders.
that's Dave, that's great. But once we make a commitment, we should go ahead with it. It's just a question of doing things before we get to that point, so we don't have to deal with such an onerous situation.
No, I agree. I mean, we wouldn't present it to you to sign, but if ultimately you still have an issue with something, if we do get to that point, then that's where you have the final say. But we would hope to not have anything come across your desk that wouldn't be agreeable to you, at that time.
Right. Again, just to reiterate, we don't want to put the vendor in that situation. They did their honorable thing, so we need to do the same thing. So again, before we get to that point, we should just consider how we're spending our money.
I think we've always done that. I think we'll
Okay.
continue to do that. I have a great deal of confidence in the borough administrator and the CMFO. So I don't know really how much is changing here. We brought in a good budget. We went back and we brought in a flat budget. And it's a budget. It doesn't mean we have to spend the money. We will prudently look at expenditures as they come along and as any impact that this coronavirus may have on us. So I don't see much changing.
Anthony, I was basically saying the same thing. It's just a question that we have to do what we have to do.
I don't know what that, okay.
I don't think micromanaging is a good thing. I think we all have a lot of confidence in Chris, and he knows how we feel about it. So at the end of the day, he's going to be accountable to us as well. So I have the utmost confidence in Chris to spend the money properly.
That comment on micromanaging should apply all the way down, John, too, to the committee
Absolutely.
level. So if there are no more comments on item number 4, before we take up the budget, I wanted to make a comment on Stony Brook, which does relate to the budget, and it's something that the council should just be aware of. Stony Brook hasn't been able to cover its expenses for several years. Now, assuming that the governor allows pools to reopen this summer, Stony Brook is likely to lose more money this year than it otherwise would have lost because of the effects of the pandemic. Membership commitments, as I understand it, are significantly reduced, and we've already spent several tens of thousands of dollars doing the basic work needed to prepare for opening. This council, I believe, needs to decide quickly what its tolerance is for more losses and what is fair to expect from the taxpayers, since they would have to pick up any net operating loss. Having the taxpayers pick up any losses would be a precedent. I believe that this probably is a topic that we don't want to get too deep into tonight, but at a subsequent council meeting, and I intend to call for a special council meeting in a few days to discuss this topic. I raise it now because there is an unfortunate impact to passing the budget tonight that will affect the Stony Brook situation. Every year, we contract with a company to get the pool ready for opening, to do maintenance during the summer and the fall, and then to close the pool down for the winter. The value of that annual contract is significant. It's approximately $175,000. Now, so far, as I understand it, they haven't done any work because the governor's shutdown has basically said, you're not going to open the pool. But if the governor decides to open or allow the pools to open under certain conditions, and if the governing body decides not to open the pool for reasons known to them, then we may not be able to avoid a liability for some portion of that $175,000. In discussions with our labor attorney, with our borough attorney, that amount is we don't know exactly what it is, but we're guessing it could be between $40,000 and $50,000. It's just a rough guess. And that's because the budget that you're going to consider tonight has appropriation funds devoted to the operations of Stony Brook. The contract that we have with the vendor allows us to remove ourselves from that liability, have that liability removed if the budget has no funds for Stony Brook. So if the governing body, for whatever reason, decides not to adopt this budget and directs the borough administrator and the CFO to come back with another budget for introduction at a subsequent council meeting, then the contract for $175,000 wouldn't be enforceable, because presumably that new budget would not have funds available for the opening of the pool this year. Now, that's a positive, but you have to balance it with the potential negatives of not adopting a current budget. And that's for the council to evaluate. One of those negatives is, as I understand it, slowness in terms of getting our road program out the door. There may be other negatives And the borough administrator, I think, is well aware of them and probably prepared to discuss them with us if we press him on it. But I just wanted the council to be aware of this little quirk before you actually tackle the budget in a few minutes.
Mayor, can I just say something?
Who's that?
It's David.
Yes, David, you have the floor.
I haven't spoken to Mr. Madeo about this, so I don't know the legal aspect of it, but from the finance part of it, we can't just not have a Stony Brook budget. You can't just make it zero if you chose to do that. There's already been expenditures that need to be covered. So you would have to have some kind of a budget at a minimum cover what we spent, and additionally what you anticipate to continue to spend even at any level of pool opening or not opening. So if the contractual loophole is based on zero budget, no pages in the budget for Stony Brook, that's not a possibility.
That's a good point. And I believe the answer would be, it doesn't have to be zero, but that would require more research on the part of the borough administrator and the borough attorney.
I just want to make that clear that you just can't say the pool doesn't have a budget. You'd have over expenditures which are illegal and would have to be then raised in next year. So you have to have something in the budget document for Stony Brook.
Right, and council should also be aware that the budget cannot be any less than what's already been appropriated through the two temporary budgets.
That's a good point, Chris. Thank you. And plus, there's the other possibility that the governor may not allow the pool to open at all, or allows them under such conditions that it becomes basically impossible for Stony Brook to comply.
I think the borough attorney brought up the force majeure, and wouldn't that come into play as well, based on whether there's an executive order or restrictions are such that it would make it almost impossible to operate?
Which is what I just said.
In the event there, I would rather not go over sort of legal strategy in open, but the concept of a force majeure, in the event there is an order or an extension of an existing executive order by the governor, making it impossible to lawfully open the pool, that of course would be a valid cause for not opening, and would likely leave everybody off the hook on both sides. The language the mayor was referring to, and Dave, this is the language which perhaps you want to take note of, is that because it's a multi-year contract, it is subject to budgeting and funding each year. So the contract specifically says as follows with regard to this budget component. It says continuation of the terms of the contract beyond the fiscal year is contingent on the availability of funds in the following year's budget. In the event of unavailability of such funds, the owner reserves the right to cancel the contract. So again, that specific language for Dave, and I've sent this on to Chris and the mayor a few days ago, so we're all sort of in the loop. Continuation of the terms of the contract beyond the fiscal year is contingent on availability of funds in the following year's budget. So again, I don't want to dissect that to the extent of a legal brief, but it does appear to indicate the availability of funds in the following year's budget. And I have to read into that the availability of funds to pay Lehman, or the availability of funds to open the pool. Of course, Dave is absolutely right. We obviously do have some, no matter what we do, we have pool expenses that have to be met and certainly has to be addressed. So anyway, that's the language the mayor was referring to. Thank you. Just wanted to get that out there.
Thank you, Mark. Unless there's further need to talk about that, I'd like to move us to the municipal budget resolution, which is R 293, which is the adoption of the municipal budget. It has been posted to our website. So at this point, I would look for a motion in a second, then see if there's any discussion among the council members, and then proceed to a vote. Do I have a motion?
Motion. Second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion at this point about the budget? We've had lots of time to look at it.
I think you had mentioned earlier that the borough administrator would give us his views on what the consequences would be of not passing a budget tonight.
I offered that as an option to the borough administrator because there was this issue of if you don't pass it, there's a little potential savings with respect to what Mark and I had alluded to, but there are negatives to not passing the budget. One of the ones I talked about that's most, what I would suspect is most interest to the residents is, the ability to do your road improvement program and complete that in a timely fashion, to go out to bid, so that the roads actually get repaved before the schools open. I'm presuming schools will open, but that's one possibility. Chris, are there any others that you would wish to add to that?
No, I think in order to get the road program out to bid on a good price and in a timely manner, to avoid traffic, since a lot of people aren't out and about, that the delay of this would delay the funds and the introduction and adoption of the ordinance, which is required into the middle or late summer, depending on how council proceeds.
Yeah, I will say to the council, in a webinar that I attended a few days ago on a different matter entirely, what they call coronavirus relief bonds, several mayors indicated that they were in the throes of producing their budget. Should they wait to get better estimates of the revenues? Should they proceed? I discussed this with the borough administrator today. I discussed it with him earlier. The advice that we're getting from our auditor and from Chris is getting from other borough administrators and the professional organizations to which borough administrators belong is that we can proceed rather safely to go on the basis of our estimates of revenue, with the understanding that we monitor the spending and possibly be able to suppress the appropriated spending later in this year to match any reduction in revenue. And that's what Chris has promised to do for us. And so I just lay that out there. That should be of some factor in your decision to consider the budget.
One final point on that, Mayor, if I may. You also run the risk of being non-compliant with the current local finance notice regarding budget adoption date. Right now, it's mandatory, as extended already, to be adopted by May 30th or your first meeting shortly thereafter in June. So an extensive amendment that may be proposed today or that you may want to do could possibly require an additional advertisement, an additional hearing, and could postpone the adoption past that June deadline, which would then put you in the bad graces of the state. I don't know how badly they're enforcing that right now, but nevertheless, you wouldn't be in compliance with the current guidance as to the deadlines for adoption. So that was just one other thing the council should consider if you choose not to adopt tonight.
Dave, would the removal of the appropriation that the mayor was referring to in Stony Brook, that would fall into that 10, is it 10% of the overall budget, or would it just be 10% of the Stony Brook budget? Would that cause us to have to reintroduce altogether?
It's not, it's 10% of any one line.
So would that cause us to need to reintroduce?
Not reintroduce, you'd have to have a hearing on the amendment and then have another, waiting period and another adoption here, hearing again. So it would definitely not be able to be done, I don't think, by June 9th. I mean, just the time to prepare the amendment from, the auditor and to get it advertised. There's a shorter window for advertisement. It's like 3 days, but nevertheless, we're already into the middle of May. So it would be very close, if not almost not possible, to meet their current deadline.
Okay, if there are no other comments on the budget, we have a motion, we have a second. I'd like to call for a roll call vote on this.
Councilmember DeRosa,
Yes.
Councilmember Escobar,
Yes.
Council President Horvath,
He's on mute.
Okay. You're muted, Zoltan.
Dalton, we cannot hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, one of the reasons I voted no the last time on this budget, because I wanted some clarification as to what procedures we're going to take in the event that we have to tighten our belts on it. And I think Chris has answered some of those questions. So I'm comfortable voting yes at this time. At the same token, I would like to be assured that we are going to be doing due diligence before we move ahead with some of those big budget items. Thank you.
Councilmember Lundy,
Yes.
Councilmember Pizzella,
Yes.
Councilmember Trohimuk.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, one and all. Gone through committee reports. There is no new business. We've gone through correspondence. Brings us to ordinances. 20-07. That's an ordinance that provides for and determines the rate, amount, and method of payment compensation to persons holding certain office and positions of employment in the Borough of Hillsdale, County of Bergen. I need a motion to open this to a public hearing.
Motion.
Second.
A roll call, please.
Council President Horvath,
Yes.
Councilmember Lundy,
Yes.
Councilmember Pizzella,
Yes.
Councilmember Trohimuk,
Yes.
Councilmember DeRosa,
Yes.
Councilmember Escobar.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'll open the meeting to the public. If anyone desires to be heard regarding ordinance 20-07, please state your name, wait to be recognized. Once recognized, state your name and address for the record. I'll entertain a motion. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. We are now open to public comment. Okay, not seeing anyone. I'll entertain a motion to close
Hello?
the pub. Hello?
Hi, this is Jason Bashar. I was just wanted to comment on a couple things that we heard tonight.
Is it pertaining to this ordinance?
It's pertaining to the entire meeting that you guys have had tonight, just kind of an overall view as a resident.
I'm sorry, but we're at the point, you'll have another.
Budgets though.
You'll have another public comment period if it's general. If it pertains to this particular matter.
Well, it pertains to budgets since you were allowed residents or a public comment, it pertains to that.
If it doesn't pertain to this particular ordinance, I'm going to ask that you hold your comments to the second public comment period.
When will that be?
Let me look on the agenda.
Because this is the second public comment. You already had one.
I don't think he understands.
Yeah, we always have two, but I'm looking at this particular agenda. This doesn't call for it, but I will insert a public comment period after we have dispensed with these ordinances. There's 2007 and 2008, and I will then open the meeting up to a public comment period. Hopefully that satisfies you. Thank you. So I need a motion to close this to public comment.
You fucking just opened.
Motion to close.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Lundy,
yes.
Councilmember Pizzella,
Yes.
Councilmember Trochy-Mute. You're muted. There we
Yes.
go. Okay. Councilmember DeRosa,
Yes.
Councilmember Escobar,
Yes.
Council President Horvath.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm looking for a motion to adopt ordinance 20-07, followed by we can have a discussion, assuming we get a motion and a second.
Motion,
Second.
Okay, would anyone like to discuss this particular ordinance? This is up for adoption. We introduced it at the last meeting.
Yes.
Yes, I'd like, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go
You
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Janetta.
You go
Ladies
first.
first.
I'll recognize Councilwoman Trojaniuk.
So this ordinance was, or this, I guess, ordinance was brought forth at the last meeting. And at that meeting, I had some commentary on not understanding the purpose of it or why there were these large dollar amounts put into the maximum column next to the individual positions being held. And so right now I see that I believe the same exact document has been resubmitted. Maybe the word "or" was inserted. And so what I would like addressed is that if in the, at minimum, what I would like addressed is if in the title of the ordinance, in the first section of the ordinance and the second section of the ordinance, if the words maximum would be put in there, because the way this ordinance reads right now in plain English is it says that each employee, for example, section 2 says each employee set forth in this section shall receive annual compensation as set forth below. That's what it says. That's what I read. So I don't understand why it says that. And I also don't understand where these dollar amounts came from. And Chris, I think we've discussed this before, but I'll give you an example of the question, very specific. You put next to your name $150,000. Every year, don't you have to submit one of these again? So you're going to submit another one next year, right?
No.
You
Historically,
submit this, go ahead.
historically, the borough there's been different variations of this ordinance with the same wording over the past 10 years. The statutory requirement of the borough is to adopt an ordinance that determines the rate, amount, and method of payment of compensation to persons holding certain offices and positions. So we're required to provide a schedule of what maximum salaries are for titles held by employees here at the borough.
Do you do this ordinance every year or you do this once?
So historically, the borough has done this ordinance every year. However, the borough has identified in some instances, the exact amount to be paid to the employees by ordinance. As I mentioned at the last council meeting, it's my intention to escalate the salaries in the maximums so that the borough does not have to advertise this ordinance each year. As I mentioned last council meeting, when I'm prepared to have salary increases or no salary increases for staff, that those salaries would be instituted by resolution if passed by the governing body.
Janetta, maybe I can shed some light on this that might help you understand it. And Mr. Medina can interrupt if I'm incorrect, but traditionally an ordinance is perpetual unless it's becomes outdated or needs to be changed or you require it to be amended. So doing this, which gives a lot of leeway in each one of these maximums, allows us to not have to touch this for possibly several years, which then only requires an annual resolution. So resolutions need to be reinstated every year, whereas an ordinance is considered permanent. So every year we would need to do a resolution to have the specific dollar amounts, but this would save time and effort to have to continually also do a new ordinance that really isn't necessary as long as you're under the maximums that could take years to get to. It just buys you a lot of time and less effort to still be in compliance with the requirements of the code. So I don't know if that's something that clarifies it. An ordinance is permanent technically, and a resolution is renewable. It needs to be renewed every year. I think that's what Chris is trying to get accomplished, is that will save that annual change to this piece of it, when there also needs to always be a resolution to do the actual salaries. So that's the intent of this, that I'm not sure maybe was as clear as that for you and maybe anybody else in the council. So if I said anything wrong, please, Mark, correct me, but I think that.
No, I would like, though, if I could, Mayor, can I offer a suggestion that may make the councilwoman more comfortable? Under that section 2, the table indicates that those numbers are a maximum. That's in the table itself, but Councilwoman is absolutely correct. It's not in the text. Perhaps it would be more acceptable if section 2 said each employee set forth in this section shall receive maximum annual compensation. And that would reflect the same language that's in the table right below it, just in case there's any confusion. And it would be very clear that this is the maximum range. And as David indicated, of course, the yearly resolution is the actual salary. The maximum is really simply that. But if it would be clearer by including that word maximum in the text, I certainly wouldn't regard that as a major change, because in fact, it just says exactly what the table says. And it might make people more comfortable if that were a sticking point.
Yeah, I was thinking along those same lines, Counselor. If you put the word maximum in the heading of the ordinance, where it talks about an ordinance to provide for and determine the rate, put the word maximum before rate. In section, put the word maximum before the word rate, and then add a comment at the end of section 1, a sentence that says something along the line, actual rates of compensation are lower than shown below and are approved by the governing body in a separate resolution. I thought that would address what I knew to be a growing concern over this particular ordinance. I did have initial concerns about the size of the numbers here, 29% increases, but I've heard the borough administrator several times talk about his rationale. Today, having the CFO stress that this is really not done every year, but it's done to cover several years. It makes it a little more understandable to me.
I would prefer.
I would like a change in the language.
Here's what I propose, and let me just, I apologize, make sure I don't want to add sentences, but again, because I don't want to make changes, but I think I can meet your goal, which is well stated. Let's add the word maximum to the title. Let's add the word maximum in section 2, where I previously indicated. And in section 1, this is about halfway in the paragraph, the rate of, start at the beginning, the rate of compensations of persons holding any of the hereafter named offices and positions of employment, which compensation shall be on an annual basis unless otherwise specified, is hereby fixed and determined to be the maximum set opposite the title of each of the hereinafter named offices. So with those changes, we're simply adding the word maximum 3 times, which is exactly what's reflected in the table. But I think it makes it a little bit clearer without being a wholesale change that might require reintroduction. So, and I think it gets to the same place, but of course I would defer to the mayor if you think otherwise.
I would
All
like to
those
comment.
salaries
I would,
are listed. I'm
Hold
sorry.
on, let me recognize who was first, Council President Horvath, and then someone else was talking, but we'll deal with that after you're done.
thank you, Mayor. I'm still not happy with this outline. What I'd like to see in this, the minimum noted. I like to see what the particular position is paying at this particular time. And if those large numbers are realized somewhere down the line, how long does it take to get there? What procedure has to be undertaken to get to that point? Right now, you're just putting all these numbers out there, which has no timeline on it. So theoretically, each one of these numbers can be paid this year and not next year or the following year. There's no indication of when that could happen.
Zoltan, I think you're missing the part about the resolution that we have to pass for each salary. We do pass a salary resolution, which has the actual salaries in it. So these
Well,
could
I
not
don't
be.
see, I don't see it in this form. This just tells you what is the purpose of this, that you're saying that this is the maximum can be paid, but it doesn't say what the particulars are. How do you get to that point?
That again is respectfully, that's in the resolution, and so this ordinance sits for the next several years, and each year you just do a resolution. Now, I don't care either way. If you'd like to use a different format, you certainly can. But even if you put a minimum and a maximum in this ordinance, it wouldn't change the fact that the actual salary is set each year based on a resolution. But of course, it's the council's choice. I didn't write particular. It'll work either way.
Mr. Mayor.
Up to you guys.
Yes, Council. Yes, Borough Administrator.
No, Mr. Mayor, if it's not the pleasure of the council to pass this evening, I think there's already been a motion to, maybe I advise the council to vote it down. However, this was an attempt, as I stated in the first meeting, to save the borough dollars. And secondly, this is the same wording and the same title that's been passed over the past 10 to 15 years. It's the same exact wording that was passed last year, with the exception of the maximums being the actual salaries. So if it's the pleasure of the council for me to do this all over again, that's fine. But then I think it's maybe in the best interest not to change how the borough has done this, and I'll bring back a resolution, an ordinance with the maximum salaries for each employee, and we can expend the funds each time that we need to change those salaries.
Thank you, Chris. That's what I would like to see.
Well, but those salaries are in a column that says in big all caps maximum.
I realize that. Again, the issue is it doesn't show the minimum, doesn't show what it takes to get to that maximum. How many
But
years?
we're not getting to it.
Let's conduct one at a time. Let Zoltan, and then I'll recognize whoever comes to the floor next.
The fact that those maximums are there in big fonts, as you mentioned, that means that these people are entitled to this number. How long does it take to get there? What kind of raises happen to
But
happen?
we pass ordinances each year that we said that to approve those salaries.
So why isn't the number that these people are allowed to be at this particular juncture, or the end of this year, or for the new year, why isn't that number put in rather than the total amount that that is in these numbers?
Yeah, like if it, I guess, what I'm hearing Zoltan, like, for example, saying, it doesn't really matter what these numbers are. You could put $1 million over here is what you're saying. These numbers are irrelevant because you still have to get together with council and approve giving anybody any type of a salary increase anyway. So really, technically, it doesn't really matter what's on here. What is on here is just supposed to preclude the borough from having to put forth a resolution or an ordinance, whatever, every time you wanted to give somebody a raise. So that what I would say is that in the past, this verbiage may be exactly the same as the verbiage that was here in the past, but certainly in those columns in the past, what they were doing is putting the actual. So then when you had an actual and you wanted to give somebody a raise, then you would have to go out and get them to approve an ordinance for the difference. So I can understand that. But then why is anyone against writing the word maximum in the, like, why do you care if the word maximum is added into the heading or into section 2? If, I mean, I brought this up at the last meeting, and basically the way I see it is it was just completely ignored. So yes, it is the council can vote this tonight and it can pass because I'm sure you have the votes to pass it. But that means you basically just disregarded anything that I said to you last time or this time, which is fine. It's up to you to do that. But I'm still going to comment on it
Your
because
point
I
is
think,
valid. I think it's just covered.
okay, but so if you think it's covered and I don't think it's covered, does it bother you to put the word maximum in the title? Does that bother you?
It's redundant, but you know, at this point, I think
It's redundant?
that I will acquiesce.
Well, can we hold a second, Mayor? I thought I suggested, based on Councilwoman's suggestion, that the word maximum be put in the title, and the word maximum be put in section 1, and the word maximum be put in section 2. And frankly, I thought that was a given at this point. So I hope that I thought that was the mayor's suggestion. I thought it was my suggestion. And certainly it was Councilwoman Janetta's suggestion.
So I'm adding it. It's in there in big letters, but if that'll help, I'm okay with it. We can vote on it with that change. I'm all right with it.
And Chris, can I ask a point of information? I think what I'm hearing, and I'm putting together what I heard the prior council meeting when we discussed this, as well as the comments on this council meeting, that there is a, I don't know, for lack of a better word, let's call it a concern that maximum here, the maximum numbers here create some sort of expectation in the public's mind or in the employee's mind. And I've seen this document, as I think someone said, several times in my tenure on council. I've seen it with mins and maxes. I've seen it just with the word max, where the max actually was the salary. So I thought that this document is always like a bit of an anachronistic document because it's not really effective. Corporations have documents like this with a minimum and a maximum, and it's designed to guide department heads in terms of what they have to offer at least a minimum salary and then a maximum. This doesn't do it. So for me, my personal view is this document is sort of useless. And we only do it because it has to be done, I guess, under the law. If it's got to be done, recommendations that the attorney makes are good. I think it helps clarify things. But I would like to know how you, the borough administrator, will make available to the public the actual salaries that we pay people in the borough. Will there be,
as I mentioned in the,
will there be one that,
right, in the previous meeting I acknowledged, and in this meeting I acknowledged that at the June 9th meeting, I would bring a resolution to the council for approval, the salaries for 2020.
Okay, great.
Can I, Mayor, can I just ask one question? You just said it's required. Mark, isn't this salary ordinance something is routine? We do it every year. It's required by law. Specific resolutions are what we do for the specific payments, like Chris said.
Correct. All that I think Chris is attempting is, in the event you put the specific actual
Yes.
salaries in this, every time you give somebody a 5-cent raise, you have to do a new ordinance, pay $200 to publish it, wait the 3 days in between introduction and publication. So you generally do an ordinance like this. Now, the question seems to be, is that this ordinance, by only specifying maximums, may make some people uncomfortable. And of course, it can be changed to whatever the council's pleasure is. I thought that the mayor and then myself suggested exactly what Janetta's concerns were, that it be clearly indicated as maximum. Now, that may still not be satisfactory to some people, but I do agree with Janetta and the mayor that we might well make it very clear that maximum should be in there 3 more times. Having said that, if that helps make it satisfactory, it's certainly in a legal form and you don't have to reintroduce. If you'd like another form entirely, that's of course the council's pleasure, and I'm sure Chris would do it for you. It's completely up to you guys.
I think what you said is fine. I think what you suggest is fine.
Okay. So move this along. I think we've heard the different points of view. We're at a point where we should take a vote on this particular ordinance. If it goes down to defeat, then we'll have to think about another form of the ordinance.
Is this
could-
What's the final conclusion? I missed all this talking. What did we conclude?
There's a willingness on the part of the attorney has suggested that we amend the ordinance to insert the words maximum. Madam Clerk, can you read where the changes are so that we all know?
Yes. The title of the ordinance will be an ordinance to provide for and determine the maximum rate, amount, and method of payment of compensation to persons holding certain office and positions of employment in the Borough of Hillsdale, County of Bergen, State of New Jersey. In section 1, you want me to read the whole section? I can do that.
Yeah, you may as well.
Okay. The rate of compensation of persons holding any of the hereafter named office and positions of employment, which compensation shall be on an annual basis unless otherwise specified, is hereby fixed and determined to be the maximum as set opposite the title of each of the hereinafter named offices and positions of employment. Whenever there shall be set forth a minimum and or maximum rate of compensation, the employee or officer shall be compensated at an annual rate within such range. Section 2 will say each employee set forth in this section shall receive a maximum annual compensation as set forth below.
Okay.
So can we say that we want to introduce it with the suggested changes, changes suggested by the attorney?
Well, that's what I was going to ask the attorney. Mark, do we vote on the amendment and then proceed to vote on the ordinance?
Yeah, this is adoption. We've just added the word maximum 3 times in the first body, in the body of the ordinance. I don't think that's a significant change because it reiterates what's in the table. So I think we should I think the council should vote 1 time on the ordinance as we just marked it up.
Great. Okay. So with that change, let me then get a motion to adopt this amended form of ordinance. Do I have a motion?
Do we need to
Motion.
re-motion? Because we already motioned. Do we need to re-motion?
I think,
That's what
I think,
that's what I'm doing, Denise. But
Okay.
I'll take my guidance from the attorney. Mr. Attorney?
I think the mayor, your impulse is correct. The motion was before we added those three maximums into it. We've now added 3 maximums into it. I think the motion should be remade on the ordinance with the 3 handwritten changes.
Okay.
Motion to pass this ordinance as marked up this meeting.
Correct.
Right, so
Okay,
Frank
that's
has made the motion.
I
Frank
motion.
has made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any
Okay.
further discussion on this? Okay, with no further discussion, let's take a roll call vote on the slightly modified version of this ordinance.
Councilmember Pizzella,
Yes.
Councilmember Trohimuk,
Yes.
Councilmember DeRosa,
Yes.
Councilmember Escobar,
Yes.
Council President Horvath,
Oh,
Councilmember Lundy.
Yes.
Okay, therefore, let it be resolved, this ordinance is adopted. Borough Clerk is authorized to advertise the same according to law. Next item on the agenda is 20-08. This is a ordinance for introduction. It's the capital ordinance of the Borough of Hillsdale and the County of Bergen, authorizing various public improvements and acquisitions in, by, and for the borough, appropriating therefore the sum of $1,273,712, and providing that such sum so appropriated shall be raised from the borough's capital improvement fund and from various grants. Be it resolved that ordinance 20-08 is now past the first reading, and that said ordinance be further considered for final passage at a meeting of the mayor and council in the municipal building on June 9th, 2020, and at said time and place, all persons interested will be given an opportunity to be heard concerning the same. The clerk is hereby authorized and directed to publish said ordinance in the Ridgewood News once, at least 1 week prior to said hearing, with a notice of its introduction of the time and place when and where said ordinance would be considered for final passage. Do I have a motion to introduce this ordinance?
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Any discussion on this ordinance? With the understanding that we will have another opportunity when it comes up for adoption. Okay, so roll call vote on the introduction, please.
Councilmember Trohimuk,
Yes.
Councilmember DeRosa,
Yes.
Councilmember Escobar,
Yes.
Council President Horvath,
yes.
Councilmember Lundy,
Yes.
Councilmember Pizzella.
Yes.
This brings us to the second public comment period, which unfortunately somehow got dropped off from the agenda. But there seemed to be at least an interest on the part of some members of the public to have it. So I will grant that. It's perfectly fine and understandable. I'd like to open the meeting to the public. Is there anyone that wishes to address the council at this point in the second official public comment period?
Hi, I tried chiming in before, and I apologize that this is my first time attending one of these, and I would just like to address a couple things that I've heard.
Could you just identify yourself?
My name is Jason Bashar,
Okay, and residents?
Watson Place, 11 Watson Place.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
So listen, I appreciate everybody putting their time and effort into these meetings, and I will, I just, when I hear things tonight about Stony Brook and other items that are on the docket concerning, furloughs and things like that. I mean, myself, my wife, we're both on a reduced salary, as are other residents in the town. We're not the only people in town that are experiencing that. We've lived in town for 10 years. Taxes have gone up every year. So for it to be 2 months in and it seems like nothing has really been addressed to look at these things, and I'm not singling out one item or one area, but like any private sector, when you're trying to run an efficient business, there are people that have to take a step back. And I was told I was taking a 50% reduction in salary. And you know what I said to my employer? I get it. We're not producing the revenues that we were. So as a town, we're not producing the revenues that we were. We're not. And it's not like we're going to gain those revenues back over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a long time. And in regards to the pool, even if the pool does open, by the governor, a lot of residents probably aren't going to feel comfortable going there. We have to be realistic with that. With that being said, that doesn't mean that we want the pool to be closed. But for us to be locked into a $175,000 maintenance contract in this kind of a pandemic, it seems crazy to me. I'm a taxpayer. I've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars into this town over the past couple of years, and I will tell you, I love this town. I have 3 kids that are in the school system, and they love the pool and they love the town as much as my wife and I do. So we just want to see everything succeed. But, we're 2 months in and a furlough or a reduced salary hasn't even been put in place of this council, what it seems like from hearing this tonight. Like, what are we doing? Other companies are reacting in a much more progressive way. And it's not a knock on people and what they're doing on a day-to-day. It's just a reality of where we are today. So I think everyone needs to take a step back and understand how we can reduce the cost of living in the town for us to be able to not operate at a deficit in 2021, 2022. There's only so much tax everyone can pay. We all pay a high tax to live in this town. We appreciate it, and we appreciate all of you. So please don't make that mistake. But, I just think that there needs to be a realization that something needs to happen sooner than later, because we're 2 months into this and it doesn't seem like any sort of preparation has been put into the realization that people aren't working at the capacity that they were before because they can't go anywhere. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bashar.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the public wish to comment at this point?
Hello.
Yes.
How you doing, Mr. Mayor? This is Michael DiBartolo. I'm a resident of Fairhaven Drive.
Hello,
and
Michael.
My comment has to deal with the front end loader that was part of one of the line items that was brought up in the budget as an essential piece. In regards to that, what is the cost of that item?
It's 150,000, I believe.
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay. Is that what deems that essential? When was the last time they received a front loader?
I know that the existing front loader has been around, I think, for close to 20 years. I would have to defer to the borough administrator for more details, but my understanding is that the equipment that we're using now has reached the end of its useful life, and there's a concern that this piece of equipment may not make it to the fall leaf season, used for the leaves as well as used for the snow. Mr. Borough Administrator, would you care to elaborate or correct me?
No, that's correct, Mayor. The current front end loader has met its useful life. The DPW superintendent has indicated that this equipment would be beneficial in the upcoming leaf season and the snow season. And if we were not to ascertain this piece of equipment, we would have to go out and rent one, which I don't believe would be economical.
Okay. All right. I don't mean to be rude by any means, but I know there's 2 loaders down there. So I know there was one bought about 3 years ago. Does anybody have a comment about that?
I know Mr. Hafler is on the line, the Public Works Superintendent. If you could unmute yourself, Billy, and address the residents' concern.
Sure. Hi, good evening. The loader that was replaced in 2016. That already has 1,600 hours on it. because that's the main loader that gets used now because we're trying to get as much time as we could out of the older one. The 2000 loader has 5,000 hours on it and is now getting to the point where it's breaking down and needing more repairs than it's worth.
Okay, and I do understand that, but I believe, I mean, like, my point I think I'm trying to bring up at this time, is it necessary for the town to make that expenditure in the pandemic moment of time when we could probably still get life out of the existing old one and currently use the good one?
I feel that it is, but that's one guy's opinion.
Yeah,
Because no
I
matter
appreciate
what,
that. Yeah,
because no matter what happens, statutorily, I have to go pick leaves up. So no matter what happens with the pandemic, I still need a full crew and equipment to pick the leaves up in November and December.
and I understand, I totally understand that. I'm very keen on what goes on with the leaves. I'm a public worker. I know what goes on. My point is, between the amount of employees you have and the amount of equipment that you're going to use, is it necessary to run them out, or are you going to run both of them out all the time? Is it something that
Yes,
you
sir.
desperately need, or you can't
We have-
survive with just one for a couple more years until we get past maybe
No.
2 years?
No, we can't survive with one. We can't
So
get
the
the town
machine is
done with
broken
one.
down.
That's where we went from where you got your leaves picked up once a year to now you're getting multiple pickups.
I
Because we have
understand.
two full crews each day. 2 crews are out.
Okay. In the past years, though, you bought several pieces of equipment. I know you guys bought a vacuum as well. That's on a that's
Right. So for the 20 years before I was employed here, there was no equipment purchase. So we had to get aggressive
Understood.
in buying equipment.
Understood. Yeah, I totally understand. I mean, to go and I get that you have to buy equipment. There's no way you can operate without the proper equipment. To space it out, though, from 15 years, 20 years, whatever it was for the old piece, to now 3 years, and you need another one 3 years. Wouldn't it be more efficient if you spaced it out? 4 years.
Well,
Understood. So
it's 4 years now. The other ones were spaced out at 5 years.
Okay.
I can't really keep spacing it out further if it's breaking down.
I understand that, and I get it. I mean, either way, it's the point I'm trying to make, is that maybe it's something that could be held off for a year or so, and you can get by until the pandemic. I don't know how much a front loader would be considered an essential item for leaves.
Okay. I appreciate what you're saying. It's considered essential.
Yeah, and Mr. DeBartolo, that front loader gets used not just for leaves, but it's a multiple purpose type of piece of equipment. It's used for snow.
I understand, Mr. Mayor, and I know we've gotten other snow pieces. New dump truck. You have a couple other trucks that they just recently got. So I mean, I'm not trying to knock the DPW, and I agree, you need equipment as much as you need it, but spacing out the equipment as you buy it is more tax efficient.
Yeah, and you don't have to be concerned about, in your comments, knocking anybody. I think your comments are well taken. They're done out of a sense of prudence. But I think Billy and the BA have researched this particular piece of equipment and come to the conclusion that the existing piece is just too risky to keep. We need to replace it. I've been through years where our equipment broke down and we couldn't take off the snow. Where leaves are getting picked up on New Year's Eve.
I've lived here for several years. I know. I understand, sir.
So and
I understand.
It's not pleasant to be the mayor in those types of situations.
No, I know. I'm sure you get the harassing calls and all, and and the concerned citizens and everything. But it's just, sometimes you can't buy stuff. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to deal with, you have to deal with it.
Right, and that's why you heard the discussions about finance in general and doing things that we previously would never have considered. These are unprecedented times, but I don't think that this is a time to take a piece of equipment that's needed and say, no, we're not going to purchase it. Maybe there will come a time when we absolutely, cannot do this. But
No, I know. I mean, listen, I'm a police officer. I know my police department, we're not getting cars. That's an essential piece of equipment. We're not getting cars. But we need
Right.
them. But we're not getting them.
Right, and it may come to pass that our own police department doesn't get the SUV that is in the budget.
No, I agree, but that would be more essential than picking up leaves, sir.
It could be, yes, it could be.
I would rather see the money go to the police department
Mayor,
than to get leaves.
if
Yes,
I could just jump in for a minute.
Yes, sure, Billy.
I think both departments are important. I'm looking at the police chief now smiling. We're smiling at each other. I
He's a
understand
great man,
you're not getting police cars. There was years where the DPW never got anything, and the police got the vehicles, or the fire department, or whoever it was. It's just our turn to get a vehicle. And the entire fleet had to be replaced because the newest vehicle that was there was a 2002 in like 2017.
And I totally understand that, but I know like you've gotten a roll-off last year, which is a dual axle roll-off. The year before you got a single axle roll-off, and you got a dump truck as well.
Right.
Those are all a couple $100,000 pieces of equipment.
Sure, and it was put in the snowplow trust fund. It was purchased out of different things. So
Understood.
I mean, there's a lot to go over.
Yeah.
It's not always what it is at face value.
No, I understand that. That's why spacing is always, I think, better than stacking,
So Michael, I think I understand where you're coming from. I think the council
I
does
appreciate
too.
that.
So, and I think at some point we do have to take the expertise of the superintendents, the
I
police
don't
chiefs, the
disagree. I do
administrators.
not disagree at all, and I get that. I'm not a DPW worker. I'm a police officer, but we all need equipment, and sometimes you just can't get it. It's got to be spaced out, and if you space it out, the replacement program is better than Mr. Horvath, waiting 15 years for a piece of equipment, because it's better to have it every 10 years than every 15 years.
Thank you.
Okay,
Hello.
thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Anyone else?
Yes. Sir.
Yes.
My name is Ted Panagopoulos, resident 77 Baylor Avenue. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Thank you for creating this space. My question to you all is this venue something that you're going to continue with in regards to council meetings? I feel it's something that's very convenient and something that's going to open up the process to a lot of families in town who don't have time because of running around getting dinner on the table to be involved as consistently as we would like to. So is this a venue that we are going to experience consistently, or is this something now that we're just doing because of the current situation?
It's the latter.
Is it something that we can continue in the future to get more people involved?
Could consider it, but I think that the effort on the part of the state is to get back to doing the business as quickly as we can on the dais with face to face. When that will happen, I can't tell you, because it depends on the governor and the health situation that we're currently experiencing. Social distancing it seems to be taking precedence now over many, many things. And if social distancing is still being required for months and months, I think you're going to see this particular mechanism of electronic meetings be maintained. I think once the social distancing can be managed in another format, and I don't want to guess as to how that might be, keeping people apart 6 feet in the council chamber, keeping the council members apart from each other. I don't know how that would work, but for the foreseeable future, this is the way we're going to be conducting council meetings.
I think it's also important to note that this space is very convenient, but it's also very problematic. It's hard to have conversation that we would normally have. Sometimes you can't hear everybody. Sometimes people lose the Wi-Fi and then they get disconnected. But I think you're right, it is very convenient, and I'm glad to hear that it's got more people involved. But it has a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, I'm currently working. I'm an educator myself, and we've gone virtually, in a drop of the hat, and we're working through components that we thought we would never be able to work through before. But I do think this technology is just going to evolve. I think it's going to actually bring us a lot closer and involve us a lot more in what's going on in the community. So I'd really like to see some effort, even when we get back to a hugging like status, to be able to have the convenience, in a sense, to be part of this process. I think it's very valuable. Thank you for your time. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to comment?
Yeah, this is Bob Sinek on Hillsdale Avenue.
Hello, Bob.
Hi, how you doing? About Stony Brook, one of the things we're kind of, I think, leaving out also is we have the one aquatic club that uses the pool, and that could bring in some revenue as well. So that, I know it doesn't offset that whole nut that we're talking about for pool maintenance, but it would help somewhat bring in some revenue. And I think we also can't forget that we don't want to underestimate the value of the pool to the community and to the families if it can be opened in a safe manner. I hope the council's not saying that tonight a decision's already been made about Stony Brook. Because I mean, if something like that was closed, I mean, that could have a big ripple effect going forward on the whole community for, with unknown consequences. I mean, who knows, what it could do to the fabric of our community. So just hope you take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to address the council?
Mr. Mayor, can I have a quick moment real quick?
Sure, who's speaking?
It's Michael DiBartolo, Fairhaven Drive again. In regards to what Bob just said about cost cutting in regards to the Stony Brook, and I think that's a lot of people's concern tonight is Stony Brook, because it is a very good thing for the community, and we all know that everybody seems to love the place. It's #1 pool in the county. In regards to that, back on the topic of the loaders, since we're going to eventually possibly have 3 front loaders, is there a thought to selling the 3rd loader, and what would the value be? And maybe that could be used to help offset Stony Brook costs?
I received a quote for trade-in for $5,000.
What year is that truck?
That's a 2000.
2000. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Anyone else like to address the council? Okay, not hearing anyone else, I'll close the public public comment session. We've already done the consent agenda. There's only one item left. I would like to table that resolution 201107. In the efforts of time, it is not necessary to take this matter up. We have 6 months to consider this as per the memorandum from the GIF. If that's, I'd like a motion to table and a second, and then we can resurrect it next week, next council meeting.
Motion?
We have a motion to table. Do we have a second? Okay.
Sorry, I had my speaker off. Second.
Okay, we have a second to table. Can we have a roll call vote on the table under this motion to push it to the next meeting?
Councilmember Escobar,
Yes.
Council President Horvath,
Yes.
Councilmember Lundy,
Yes.
Councilmember Pizzella,
Yeah, yes. Sorry.
Councilmember Shohimu,
Yes.
Councilmember DeRosa.
Yes.
Thank you. We have no closed session tonight. I'd like council commentaries at this point. Why don't we start with the first council person I see on my screen, which would be Mr. DeRosa.
Okay, just real quick, I'd like to thank the residents who were and able to make their quarterly tax payments, and especially those who may have had to choose between some discretionary other purchases to make it. We appreciate you doing that. And just another comment, you know, it's times like these where people ask themselves, you know, why did I go into my line of work? Why did I decide to be a nurse? Why did I decide to be a fireman, a school teacher? And it's times like this that, you know, you kind of, it's introspective. You ask yourself, you know, why really did I do that? And I think if you ask those people, the one common answer that would come back would be to help people. And I don't think many of these essential workers signed up for a pandemic to help people in, but I'm sure glad that they're there and glad that they're doing what they do. That's all.
Thank you, Anthony. Councilman Horvath.
Yes, I would just like to comment on the vote for the budget. Again, I'd just like to reiterate that I would like some due diligence on that before anything is spent.
Councilman, we can't hear you. No, you're not coming. Why don't you work out your technical difficulties, and we'll move on to Councilman Escobar.
I have nothing at this time.
All right, thank you. Councilman Pizzella.
I apologize for my voice. As you know, I've been sick for several weeks. I did test positive. I want to thank all the essential workers. I also want to thank my wife, who happens to be as well. And she also was positive and sick for a while. If anybody out there listening is sick, I wish you all the best. Take care of yourself. And I do thank all the residents that are showing up on the screen, that are coming. I think it's great. If this scope or this venue makes it easier for you to get involved, I'm excited about that. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Lundy.
Okay, first off, I would like to congratulate Denise Cohan on her appointment. And her dedication and hard work is evident every day, and we're very fortunate to have her here in Hillsdale. I also want to recognize the Department of Public Works Week, and all of our DPW employees. They are putting themselves out on the front line as well, and you know, appreciate everything that you're doing. And lastly, once again, just want to thank all of the first responders and essential workers for everything that they're doing in this unprecedented time. Urge everybody to keep social distancing, follow the governor's and CDC guidelines and recommendations, and stay safe.
You're muted.
Councilwoman Choremuk.
You were muted.
I know.
Yeah. I would like to thank everyone that came online for the meeting. When we started this meeting, I think there were 64 people online, and I don't think that I can recall that there were ever 64 people. Maybe I'm wrong, but that seemed like a lot of people being able to come and attend these meetings, which I think is great. The individual that spoke today, if we, you know, maybe we'll take it under advisement and figure out a way that even if we go back into chambers, maybe there is one way of doing one of the meetings online, for example, so that might be able to get more people involved, which I think is very, very important. I agree with everything that they had to say, and I'm very glad that they spoke up. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Horvath, any comments?
You're still no good.
You're not coming in, Councilman. Look at all the impressive looking equipment you have there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. No. Okay. Good. I'd just like to end then on a note of gratitude. Much deserved praise has been going to our first responders here in Hillsdale for their service to the community during the pandemic. But one sector of our service community may not have drawn the attention I think it rightly deserves, and that's our public health nursing staff. And this is particularly appropriate given that May is National Skilled Nurses Month. All of us know from the news reports how the nursing community has been called to the front lines in dealing with the virus. It has struck me, my family, all too closely to home as I've been dealing with several nurses who are tending to my mom who was tested positive with the virus. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank publicly our two public health nurses, Marguerite Deppert and Lois Cohan, for their long hours that they've devoted in their roles to the crisis. Marguerite and Lois have been monitoring, been tracking. They've been reporting the numerous positive cases of the virus here in town. They've been staying in touch with the people who have gotten the virus and their families. They've been interacting with Northwest Bergen Regional Health Commission to ensure that our citizens remain safe and that the requirements of the county and the state are met. I also might add that Lois, in her, quote, spare time, has been a key individual in the effort to ensure that our food pantry is run effectively and that our local assistance board is serving the needs of its clients in this area. I want to thank both Margaret and Lois for all the work that they do. So if there are no more comments, I would like to call for a motion.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Yes, sir.
You can't hear me.
No, you can't.
Thank you. Let me try it for the third time. I would just like to thank the council for taking up all these important issues. As you see how important it is for the town as a whole. We had a lot of people come on and listen to us, and this teleconferencing could be something that we can do in the future, as Janetta said, maybe once a week or maybe once a month. At least people can come board and see what they have to say and what we have to say. Also, I would like to, again, to reiterate my yes vote on the budget. Again, it's predicated on doing due diligence. It's predicated on us not spending money that we don't need to spend at this particular time. I don't want to see the town held back. I don't want to see people laid off, but we need to do what's good for the town as a whole. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. With no further comments, I call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, one and all. Thank you for joining us